Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this new virtual conference, Get Connected by QuickBooks. The session that I've been asked to do today was originally going to be entitled Managing Business Continuity, obviously because of some of the stuff that's going on in the world with COVID and the strange place we find ourselves in. I very quickly kind of pivoted that and shifted it into mobility because, in my view, part of the whole idea of being having the continuity is to have the mobility. So hence striking out the word continuity and adding in the word mobility in terms of what we're going to talk about today. And as we often talk about in my firm, where we are right now is sort of moving from preparedness to acceleration in a crisis. So the agenda that I have for you today is a very brief introduction. And of course, we're going to talk about business mobility. And as I go into that, what I would like to sort of reflect upon is some of the things that have happened to us in the past 2 years in particular, but maybe even 5, in terms of what our journey was in digital transformation at Baker Tilly, which has really been a focus for us for several years now. And from there, some views I have on how you make digital transformation happen. And a key piece of that, which I will certainly be referencing as we go through, is communication platforms, which is really kind of central to most anything that you do in digital transformation and in business continuity, mobility. Communication is really the hallmark, the central piece of all that. And then we'll have some closing remarks. So as one housekeeping matter, I've been asked to point out that this session does qualify for CPD credits. You do receive 1 hour credit if you stay on this session till the very end, and then your certificate will be emailed to you as is indicated on the overhead. So I did want to, for a moment, this is my first opportunity to present with Intuit. And it's fun, and I'm really pleased that they asked me. And I haven't really done a lot of conferences outside of my own organizations, but some of the roles, I think, in terms of why I was asked to participate in this, and right now and over the past year or two, I've had several roles going on in my life. My main role is a managing partner of Baker Tilly in Nova Scotia here in Halifax. We're a CPA firm with 110 people, depending on which season that we're actually in. And that's probably 2/3 of my time. But a third of my time over the past couple of years has been as chair of the Baker Tilly Canada organization. We're a cooperative with 19 member firms across the country. And that gives me, we're one of the top 10 firms in Baker Tilly International, so I de facto get a seat on the BTI board. And on that board, I have the great pleasure, actually, of being a member of the Global Innovation Hub, which is looking at innovations around the world, what other jurisdictions are doing, and trying to bring those innovations back into whatever jurisdiction our networks and our individual firms around the world. So it's a pretty interesting aspect when you're listening to the folks from Germany and Australia in terms of what innovations that they're bringing out in their jurisdictions. My journey here to this really probably started back in 2016-17 when I was asked to be chair of our Information Technology Advisory Committee and usher in some new technologies for Baker Tilly, for individual firms and for the network. And it's always been a passion of mine, technology innovation, and so I've spent a fair amount of time trying to usher a change, innovation in both my own firm and Canada over the past number of years. And that was convenient for me because 2 years ago, I became, after I was chair of ITEC, I became the chair of our 2020 Vision Committee, which was set up in late 2018 to create a vision for what Baker Tilly would look like in 2020, which was convenient for me because that rolled right into my role of being a chair of the network. And the last role that I have, which actually occupies a chunk of my summer, is my wife and son and daughter. We own a motel in Surrey, PEI, a 15-unit motel, the Lighthouse and Beach Motel. And without any question, my spouse is the CEO. My son would be the COO. And so I guess I would take on the title of the CTO of the Lighthouse and Beach Motel, one of the fun things we get to do in the summer. So, into our topic in hand. What does business mobility even mean? And to me, we all have these devices, that we carry around with us, and we're reachable all the time. But that's not business mobility. Just because you can get emails and texts and phone calls or wherever you are, by no means is that business mobility. Business mobility is when you ask yourself questions like, how mobile are your relationships with your clients and your workforce? And that's really the major key in business mobility. So it's much more than having your workforce go into home offices. The big question, and really the challenge that you would have as you go through this, is how do you mobilize your office culture and your firm's vision and values? Because it's one thing just to move into in our case in Halifax, our dispersed office in the 100 home offices. But how do we maintain the culture that we had when we were all physically in the same office? Ensure that we have inclusiveness, engagement by our people, and really the social aspect of our firm. And from there, extend your vision and your values. And your values, when you're trying to extend them to a mobile workforce, really require some thought and some focus. So we're going to talk a bit about some of those things as we go through. But when I say business mobility, it isn't whether you can take a phone message or even a video call at your cottage. It's about how do you mobilize your office culture, your vision and values, and your relationships. So again, as a backdrop, one of the things that I've been doing for the past few years, as I said, developing Baker Tilly Canada's 2020 vision, aka our digital transformation, and it was built on 3 pillars. And I'm not sure how many times I spoke to our network on various topics, but almost every time I do, I start with these 3 pillars. Most any audience, and accountants in particular, you can, if you have 3 topics to follow, that certainly makes things convenient. So we've always talked about technology innovation, talent development, and brand evolution as the 3 cornerstones, the 3 pillars of our digital transformation as we get ready to have a mobile workforce. So technology, I don't want to spend much time talking about technology, or very little today, on one of the pillars, because I think what's happened over the past few months, we all get the technology, whether you're using the Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever platform you're using, and everybody has a log into their office and can work from home. So those are just the bread and butter, the staples today, in terms of having the hardware available. So it'll be more the other 2 pillars I want to talk about, but one of the things that I truly believe in, and it's maybe the hardest part about technology innovation, is the 2 key elements of adoption and deployment. And so the recognized difference between highly successful firms and those less successful, the speed with which they adopt new technologies, and the intensity with which they're employed. And so speed is a hard thing when you try and get people to adopt a technology. But if they have access to their old technology, they will use it. The path of least resistance is human nature. And so when you're trying to create new technology in your office, it's important that you come at it with intensity and you come at it with speed, and then you cause that change to happen. And I think back to when we first adopted our intranet several years ago, I think 2016 or 18, and we use Igloo as that platform. And so that's centralized, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well, but that centralizes our communication internally in our office, and it centralizes our knowledge sharing. And we first came out with that. The first things I said to our office was, "Hereforth forward, we shall never again send internal emails in this office, full stop." And I remember the day I said that in an office meeting, one of the people said, "Except for important emails, right?" And I said, "Especially important emails. We will not send emails in this office sharing news. If you want to be part of this firm, you have to go to Igloo. That is the only place that you will get knowledge on what's going on, what's happening in this firm. There will be no emails here forward." And it took me a while to go around, and Jamie would send an email. I'd walk down to his office, say, "I asked you not to do that." And a week later, Mary would send an email, and walk down to her office, say, "I asked you not to do that." It actually, but it took several months. several months later. And then what happens is it catches on with the younger crowd or a group, and it wasn't always the younger people, but it catches on with a group of people, and they really start using it, and then it takes on a life of its own. It was taken on, so speed and intensity, and it's very much a part of the culture of my office is our intranet. And if we didn't do that, emails would have continued, I'm sure, to this day. Now, I know this is an Intuit conference, and they did not ask me to put this overhead in, but I want to tell you one of the real key components of mobility is cloud. And one of the big shifts for us in Baker Tilly, Canada, was to move away from on-prem monthly accounting for our clients and go to cloud. And I guess maybe 3 years ago now, give or take half a year, that we really started bridging a really strong relationship with Intuit and started moving our clients into the cloud. I remember the conference that a few people from our technology committee went to, the Intuit conference in the US, and they came back blown away by the app stack, integrated systems. And I won't name vendors, but it was just, the whole syncing of the bank and everything, which 2 years ago was quite a mind-blowing thing. Today, it's kind of a staple. But we saw that and said, we have to go there. This has to be part of our future. And so we, out of our 19 firms, we got to, 3 or 4 or 5 on board. And then came a point we said, okay, we want to brand this. And we looked to our neighbors south of the border, and they use the term Baker Tilly Advantage, which is just cloud computing. And so we agreed to use the same name. And so south of the border is, BakerTillyAdvantage.com, north of the border, BakerTillyAdvantage.ca. And, AKA QBO and an app stack. And it's key. And so, in terms of intensity of adoption, one of the, in 2019, January 2019, we told our member firms, this is going on our national website. I think we told them like in October, November. This is going on our website in January. Baker Tilly Advantage, a national service line. And so your clients are going to call you and say, oh, I see you can do this. And so over the next 3 months, every one of the other member firms very quickly started doing the QBO certifications, learning some app stacks, bank syncing, and all of a sudden we had a moment in time when the firms really had to move quickly to the cloud. And we've had a great relationship with this product and with several of the bolt-on apps. And in my office, if I went back 3 years ago, we had 2 people doing monthly accounting with on-prem software. Today, we have 12 people working in the Baker Tilly Advantage service line. So it's a big piece of our practice. We're still working on the profitability side of it. Not quite there in terms of the rest of the practice. It takes a lot of commitment, time, training, but it was without a doubt a huge component of our transformation in terms of being mobile. Was adopting cloud computing. So one of the areas that I think is really critical is talent development and hiring from non-traditional streams. So fastest growing service lines for CPAs, data analytics, systems integrations, cybersecurity, performance measurement. So remaining relevant is one of the key things that I like to talk about when where we're going as an organization, remaining relevant with our clients. And, you have to have training in these areas, data analytics in particular, in terms of where we're going and what we're doing with our clients, and systems integrations as you take your client systems into mobility, and continuity of operations. Like ask anybody, any of your clients that had a cloud-based accounting system, and how did the continuity of their business work over the past, since March 16th. And I'm sure they're going to tell you that it was fantastic. And those that have on-prem software, not so much. So this overhead, I could spend the entire session on this one topic and still not give it enough time, and that is data security. And you should train. The phishing tools, and other things, multi-factor authentications, and all of this stuff. I do believe as a mobile business, a mobile workforce, we are building a better house. We're trusted advisors, and clients trust us with their data. And when they do, the one thing we better do is protect their data. And that's not a core function of our business. That is our lifeblood. That's what we are. That's how we exist. And data security, data protection, it just cannot be overemphasized. Whatever effort you're putting into that, it should probably be more. And if you're not putting much focus on it, then you should be rethinking what you're doing, because this is critical to mobility. As you make that mobile workforce, and you can have continuity when you have disruptions like COVID, you better have data security, and all of your organization understand it. It's not good enough for your IT director to understand it. Your entire office operation, from top to bottom, every single person has to understand data security. We talk about this in all our town halls in my firm. So two things that I like to talk about in talent development, and one I was just obviously going through. So as we enter into these worlds of machine learning and AI, there are certain musts when it comes to thinking about skills for team members, owners in the business. And of course, number one is the data privacy, and it can't be overemphasized. Your technology people are enablers, but they also need to know that when it comes to protection of client data, there can be no shortcuts. And so whatever they tell you that you need to do, even if it is a bit of an irritant, buy into it. You're protecting your client's data. And so the second thing I think that's really important as we try and transform our businesses really is creativity. And I love this quote, which comes off of Google. Give credit where it's due. And creativity is what fuels big ideas, challenges employees' way of thinking, and opens the door to new business opportunities. Creativity and innovation are often used interchangeably for that reason, but are two separate concepts. Creativity is different because creativity is a mechanism to be innovative. And I apologize for reading that word for word. I don't like to do that, but I think every word in that quote is important. And when you're going to move your business and you're going to have paradigm shifts in what you're doing, you need creativity to sort of see where this business can go, how you can have that continuity and the mobility as you go forward. And it takes some creativity, communication platforms, interactions, social interactions, and all that things. You're going to have some changes and some creativity. Now, brand evolution is an interesting concept, and to say it's one of our three pillars. But it is when you have a unique opportunity, to take advantage of some key moments, to redefine who you are, but really, more importantly, how the marketplace sees you. So, today, never let a good crisis go to waste. If you're doing things to mobilize yourself, mobilize your workforce, and you're going to keep those things. Look for the things that are working really well and keep them, embrace them. But make sure the marketplace knows that you're something different than you used to be. And how you pivot and get that into their mindset is critical. But, each business is different. We were lucky in our organization back on Jan 1, 2019. For 51 years, our organization was called Collins Barrow. Fabulous organization, and we had a lot of commitment to that name. It took us through 5 decades, and we were proud of our heritage. But there was certainly a global movement in Baker Tilly for all the countries to adopt the Baker Tilly global brand. And one by one, we were one of the last holdouts in Canada in terms of keeping our old name. But on January 1st, 2019, we changed our name. And so our original advertising that came out had the banner Collins Barrow is now Baker Tilly. And shortly thereafter, I started saying, whenever I was talking to our board or our network or my office, but bear in mind and be clear on this point, Baker Tilly is not Collins Barrow. Baker Tilly is something different than what we used to be. We're a digital organization. We believe in data analytics. We believe in mobility, and we believe in cloud, and we're not the same organization we used to be. We're proud of what we were and how we got to where we are. But we're going to be is different than what we used to be. And so we've focused on that point a lot, that Baker Tilly is not Collins Barrow. We're very heavily focused on data and certainly see that is a huge component of our future. He who owns the data wins. So if you're in a unique opportunity right now to redefine who you are, take advantage of it. So making digital transformation happen. And this is another overhead that I've been through several times, and it's I think in a lot of senses, maybe the most important overhead of what I'm going through today, and how you make digital transformation happen. And there's 3 steps to that, and they all involve the word believe. And step 1 is believe digital transformation is happening. And that sounds simple, but I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with partners in my own firm, partners across the country, and say, how different do you think your organization is going to be in 12 to 18 months? It's a pretty short time frame. And the response I get a lot of times is, well, I don't think it'll be very different in 12 to 18 months. But in 3 to 5 years, I expect big change. So I don't think I really have to do anything this coming year. And I'd say, well, you don't have to look very far backwards, 12, 24, 36 months, and you've seen tremendous change. And if you believe in rate of exponential change, and I do, then you have to look at what's coming up in the next 12, 18, 24 months. Could be significant, substantial changes. And the only way you can get your people to go down that journey with you is if to your very core, you believe digital transformation is happening. So you can't just say it. That has to be part of your your DNA, core to everything you believe, that digital transformation is happening, and your organization needs to be part of it. So once you believe that it is actually happening, the second part is action's actually required. You can't just take your existing practices and assume that you're going to make it through digital transformation. Some action on your part is required, whether that involves taking your office software on-prem to in the cloud, hiring from non-traditional sources, training in cybersecurity, but action is required. And very important, number 3 is investments required. So when you sit down this fall to do your 2021 budget, and you look at your technology line, are you simply going to take 2020 and add 3%? Or are you going to take 2020 and add 50%? When you look at your professional development, staff training, team training line, are you just going to take your last year's budget and add 3%? Are you going to add 25 or 75%? Because investment is required and action is required. And adding 3% doesn't coincide with the first bullet on this overhead that you believe digital transformation is happening. So 1, 2, 3, believe it's happening, action's required, and investment is required. So back to mobility. So in golf, of course, at the major, Saturday is moving day for most all of us. Friday, March 13th, that was the week as we went through the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th. Major sports leagues were closing down. COVID was obviously happening, and monumental shift was happening in an instant. And off we went. The week of March 16th to 20th, almost all businesses in Canada in that week, moved into a mobile state, and people went to work from home or didn't work at all. But for those of us that could work from home, how did your business continuity go? Were you able to pivot and innovate? In my office, our technology was fine. We were good to go with 1 day's notice. We had, we're in Canada. We have a bunch of snow days every year. Our staff goes home. We work. It's fine. But working at home 1 day or 2 versus working at home 1 month or 2 or 3 are completely different things. You can detach and go home for a day, churn out a very productive day and go back to the office the next day. You might even work on an ironing board that day, or you work on your kitchen table, and you're not disturbed, get a lot of work done, pretty cool. But you can't do that for months and end. Ergonomics set in, you need a proper work environment at your house, and you need to reestablish those relationships. So, communication's the new norm. Teams meetings for us were huge. We were using them before, but they went to a whole new levels. I'm assuming they did for all of you as well. So, communication, the core of remote work. So, I do believe the mistakes that firms are making is trying to replicate their existing communication practices across a distributed team. And it doesn't work. And you end up with a lot of these things, the negative points that I have up there, sending and receiving more emails than ever. How do you deal with paper clients, constantly disrupted? And those are some of the things that happen. And Outlook is one of the worst. And so folks that know me, would know that I am a huge fan of what Microsoft is doing. Satya Nadella, the stuff he's doing with that company to me is amazing. And we are certainly a Microsoft follower in terms of what we do in our office, the platforms that we use. I also hate Outlook. I think Outlook is a productivity killer. I always speak against Outlook. I don't like Outlook. I mean, Outlook has obviously a purpose in terms of sending mail, but it is not a to-do list. It's not a chat function, and we all send emails and expect immediate responses. We send emails to a group, and in my office, I actually do go back to people and say, send the email to one person first, the person who you think could probably answer it, and then say, and if you can't answer this, can you say who I should ask? So instead of my firm, send an email to all partners, which is 14 people, and you say, like, why do you think you needed to disturb 14 people? Probably one person could have answered your question. You don't do that in the office. You don't walk out of the office and there's 14 partners down the hallway, stand at the end of the hallway and scream at the top of your lungs a question for all 14 of them to hear. So don't do that when you go home. So it is, we need fewer tools, but key to that, we really need better team behavior. So I came across this a few weeks ago, and it really is a mouthful. And so this is going to be a takeaway for me from this presentation, and maybe some of you as well. And it's the use of asynchronous communication, and that is a mouthful for sure. Asynchronous communication is when you communicate without the expectation of an immediate response. Kind of a cool concept, as opposed to synchronous communication, when you speak to somebody and you expect them to answer you right back, like in a face-to-face meeting, you're in a board meeting, and you can have that type of rapport. That's fine. But when we're remote, this idea that everything you do requires immediate reaction response, well, that's just not the way to go. You will have a less productive team. You'll create a lot of stress. And it isn't the thing to do. But how do you approach that? And if you Google and go through, there's lots of really cool ideas. It's on the next slide as well. But asynchronous communication, and that could be as as simple as trying to organize a meeting. One of my other pet peeves: meeting request going out to 8 people or 24 people. Are people available next Wednesday at 4:00? And people start hitting reply all, says not at 4 but 2 the next day. And, I try not to reply to people and say, I didn't ask you, the organizer did. Don't include me in your response. And if you receive this request about a meeting next Wednesday at 4:00, you don't need to stop what you're in the middle of and reply to me. And maybe your email needs to say, sometime in the next day or two, could you look at your calendar and let me know by end of day Friday whether you're available following Wednesday for a meeting or something like that. So when you look at these stats, you see things like, all this real-time communication is going on. Research has found it's not uncommon for workers to spend 80% of the workday, not 80% of the workday doing these 3 things. Communicating with colleagues in the form of email, average of 6 hours a day. And then you do your annual appraisal of your staff and you say, I notice your productivity is not as high as it was the year before. Like, what do you think that is caused by? And I know the lower the person being reviewed by the more senior person wants to say, well, responding to the 45 emails you send me every other day takes up a good part of my day, but they probably can't say that. And then you go into the meeting time and certainly the instant messaging, which is a whole other thing. And this requires leadership and clear direction to change. And it is one of the things that says, I was preparing for this, I came across this and thought, that's something that I'm going to work on for the next couple months. In terms of training senior people in my firm, what synchronous communication is and how you can directly impact the productivity of the people you're working with by not expecting these immediate responses to everything that you do. I certainly have partners that want immediate responses to everything that they send out, but they definitely do not need it. So, build a communication platform. Don't just wing it. Build a strong platform. Everyone's working remotely. They want to feel connected, and there needs to be a social element to that. And so when we first started this process, The first week we went home, so maybe not the week of the 16th to the 20th, whatever that is. It'd be like more like the week of the 23rd to the 30th of March, fourth week of March. I started talking to all of our senior people and partners and said, you have to have 2 to 3 per day as a minimum social calls with other people. And when you're talking to them, you have to say to them, you have to have 2 to 3 social calls per day. Not about work, call about the weather, call about their pets, call about what they watched on TV last night. The same as you do in your physical office. And that has to happen. And we drove hard on that with our senior people for the first few weeks, last week of March, first few week of April. And, I was, proud, when late April, I'd be talking to like a second year student and say like, how's things going? Are you chatting with anybody regularly? And I would get the response, oh yeah. Manager or senior manager, calls me like every second day. And I try to reach out to the first year people once or twice a day. So usually I have 5 or 6 social calls a day, just 2 or 3 minutes. And that, okay, that's great. That's what had to happen. And I'm really thrilled that it actually is happening. So the other thing I want to mention is, building rapport in video calls. And this is one that actually just sort of came about for me. And so once COVID came in, we started doing weekly town halls every Friday at 3 o'clock. It's supposed to be half hour, and they run more like 45, 50 minutes. The first few Fridays in March, they were critical. There was so much happening so quickly that we had to have that direct line of communication to our entire office on a weekly basis. And it was critical information, and they were much more detailed information. As the weeks rolled out, it started to become more of a social call, which is fine. When we first started, there was lots of information, people had concerns. When I spoke, I could get lots of people talking back to me on the call. I typically have around 90 people on the phone call in the Teams meeting. And I found as we went on, I was having a harder and harder time getting people to talk. But then when I finally, because I wasn't doing it as a presenter, when I turned on the chat bar on the side, our chat bar had exploded into this social network. And during my sort of a 40-minute presentation, we have anywhere from 80 to 150 chats that are going on. And that doesn't include the emojis and the thumbs up and everything else that goes along with the chats. And they do these GIFs and the 3-second videos. And at first I thought, well, are they paying attention to what I'm trying to say to them? But then I quickly came to the realization, well, that doesn't really matter. They're engaged, it's social, they're having fun, we get huge attendance, so it's doing what it's doing. And, one of the funny things is some of our junior staff invented a bingo game. So they actually took out a recording and they ran a script on it to find out, what words I say. And then they made bingo cards. And usually about a third of the way through my presentation, I'll see in the chat where goes bingo. So somebody has a line of words that I've said, and they've completed their bingo card. So it's kind of funny, and it's it's entertaining. But bring some rapport into your video calls, and don't be worried about having some fun. I have 2 last overheads I want to touch upon, and one of them has to do with not sending as many emails. And I'm sure you can see this very well, but in the top left hand corner you see Return to Office Plan. This is a channel inside Microsoft Teams. And early on, the number of emails we were getting in my office about COVID was crazy. And then you go home and watch the news and you read your phone and you're reading all the exact same stuff yourself. And I think, oh my God, I do not need emails from partners and staff about COVID. It's all I read anyway. And so we started creating these. This one was actually about Return to Office Plan, about how you come back into your office. And went back out and said, okay, we're going to create some channels and stop sending emails. Stop sending emails about news articles. And most of the platforms, I know whatever one you use, this is not unique to Teams, I don't think. What you see in front of you is somebody just took a URL, well, I did in this case, and posted a URL in the chat and hit enter. All I did. I'm reading a story on the internet. I go up, copy the URL, go into the chat function, paste, enter, done. I didn't type anything. And you get this graphic, and you get a header, and 3 or 4 lines of explanation. And I can tell you, when you're scrolling down 15 or 20 articles looking for something, this presentation compared to looking at a folder in your inbox in Outlook is like 100 times better. And you don't get a lot of crap in your inbox. So there's some really cool ways to share articles and information with team and not clutter your inbox. And so finally, the last time is back to my intranet. And it really is. I said earlier about how this kicked off and requiring that people don't send internal emails. Um, I remember the first year we had it. At one point, we on Mark's Day, I told people instead of sending out an email, I was going to do a post in Igloo to say who passed the CFE, and all of our writers passed that year. And our office has two sides, and half and half, and 50 people, 50 people. And I remember that day that I hit post and I instantaneously heard applause erupt from both sides of the office. And within 1 to 2 minutes, people that were actually out in the field were posting comments. And at that moment, I knew, okay, wow, like we really have engagement in this social platform. Sometimes for me, it gets a little too Facebookish, but that's okay. And key to, I think, a successful internet, which I tell my partners, is we don't own it. We pay for it. We don't own it. It's part of our culture. And I guess one of the last things I want to say before I wrap up is that such a huge part of our culture is built into Igloo in terms of how we share information, how we share personal experience, how we stay in touch with each other. That was a huge piece of what we were doing when we were in the office, all of us inside our one office. And then on March 16th, we all went home, and this didn't change one iota. People kept their posting pictures of their home offices, and the whole social interaction that we had in the office didn't change when we left the office. And to me, that was, maybe more luck than good planning, was an example of true business mobility, that we moved people into 100 different locations, and our culture was mobile. We took it out, and it carried on just like it always had. And people are still in touch with each other. They still share things, and they look there for information. They're there every day. We've got a little professional development thing we do there every day, a little 2-minute video thing, which is kind of cool. So it's a process. I can tell you it's challenging, and it gets frustrating by time, but it's also very rewarding. So I hope there were some takeaways for you in that, in terms of how you become mobile and some of the pluses and minuses of getting mobile. And I do have some time now for some Q&A, so I certainly welcome an opportunity for somebody to throw some questions at me. Thank you.